Hey everybody, welcome back to the Golden Bolt. If you couldn't tell by the channel name, I'm a huge Ratchet & Clank fan, so much so that I reviewed Ratchet & Clank 1 twice. So this week we're going to review Ratchet & Clank 2 once. Ratchet & Clank Going Commando did not suffer the same pre-development issues that its predecessor did. While the original Ratchet game was developed by Insomniac's 40 employees 6 months late due to Girl with a Stick failing to get off the ground, Going Commando started development with a team double that size, half a year early. Sony's focus testing showed them that they had something huge on their hands here, so they greenlit a Ratchet & Clank sequel 5 months before the original even came out. And their testing was right, for the record. Ratchet & Clank was the first Western game to ever be bundled with a system in Japan. And it held firm in Japan's top 100 charts for half a decade too, solidifying the duo as a permanent mascot for the PlayStation brand. That's not bad for a last-minute audible. Okay, now back to the sequel. The pressure was on to make Ratchet bigger and better, to learn from their missteps, and to create another massive hit. And yeah, they did. Released to critical acclaim almost exactly a year after the first game, on November 11, 2003, Going Commando reinvented the duo with all new mechanics, a new lead actor, and a new galaxy for players to explore. I'll explain a bit more of these development choices as I get into their respective categories, but before I get right down to it, I have to give one caveat. I'm reviewing the PlayStation 3 version of this game via the HD collection, just as I did with the first game. I chose this version mainly because the PS2 versions have a tendency to be unbearably dark when recording in my experience. However, with Going Commando onward, the PS3 ports of the original Ratchet games are pretty buggy. Part of this is due to the HD collection being released 2 months before it was originally supposed to, meaning the developers never really got a chance to polish up the latter two games, but also due to the very way the PS2 games were originally coded. There is a lot of duct tape and bubblegum holding these games together. They pushed the console to its absolute limits, and when translated directly over to a different hardware architecture, there's bound to be problems. If you want to know more, two former developers of the Ratchet series actually have a YouTube channel called Useless Podcasts, where they discuss the development of Going Commando and its sequel, and the issues the HD ports have. If you see any weird glitches such as Ratchet's helmet floating above his head during some cutscenes, just keep in mind that is not representative of the original product. Going Commando starts off several months after the first game, with the duo finally settling back into normal life after their 15 minutes of galactic fame. Well, maybe I should specify intergalactic, as Ratchet and Clank are teleported onto a random spaceship by this gentleman. He introduces himself as Abercrombie Fizzwidget, the CEO and owner of Megacorp, a rival to Gadgetron situated in the nearby Bogon galaxy. Bogon? He asks Ratchet for help retrieving a biological experiment, this blue Furby-looking thing, that was stolen from the Megacorp labs, and obviously Ratchet agrees. Clank is more hesitant though, so he's put up in an apartment in Bogon for the time being. Ratchet is then given the full Megacorp Commando training,
including martial arts, heavy weaponry, survival skills, stealth, macrame, ballroom dance, and origami.
And from here the journey begins. Ratchet almost retrieves the Furby during the rescue mission before he comes into contact with the Thief, a mysterious but clumsy figure. The Thief escapes and the first act of the game is playing catch-up. I won't go into full detail, but in a nutshell, Ratchet goes to a couple planets, saves Clank from the Thief, at which point Clank joins the journey, and continues trying to find the experiment, all while being hunted by a mercenary group hired by the Thief, known as Thugs for Less. This is probably a good spot to put out a spoiler warning. If you don't want the plot of the game to be spoiled for you, click right here. Eventually, Ratchet and Clank finally do catch up, defeat the Thief, and retrieve the specimen. They meet Fizzwidget on an old mining planet where Fizzwidget... yeah. Ratchet and Clank find their way through the caves back to the surface where they encounter the Thief yet again. The Thief, now revealed to be a female Lombax named Angela Cross due to...
Whoa! She...
explains that the experiment being back in Megacorp's hands could put the entire galaxy at risk. She stole it and quit her job at Megacorp to try and stop this. The Furby, now officially named the Protopet, is an extremely violent creature that only cares about eating anything it sees, and Megacorp plans to release it to the public. Whoops. Ratchet and Clank begin working with Angela to try and retrieve the Protopet, but they run into some problems, namely Thugs for Less. Megacorp noticed that Fizzwidget had been acting different, so they hired Thugs for Less to break their contract with Cross to protect Fizzwidget. Even knowing this, Ratchet and Clank go try and meet Fizzwidget and are captured and sent to prison, from which they almost immediately escape. Okay. They go save Angela and take down the Thugs for Less leader at the Thugs HQ, and then continue their journey to stop the Protopets. Until the Protopets are all released for sale, and then all hell breaks loose. After a couple planets of sidetracking, they reach the Megacorp HQ, where it's revealed that it's Quark. Quark is the villain. He wore a disguise to make him look like Fizzwidget, and then hid the real Megacorp owner in a closet. Okay, so you know how I said that there were some development choices that I'd explain later? Well, this is one of them. The whole synopsis that I just gave you probably sounds really disjointed and kind of jarring at times, no? That's because that's how things are in this game's plot. Quark was added late into development when the team at Insomniac realized they really missed the big doofus. So he hijacked the otherwise empty role of main villain, and then they sprinkled in these little behind-the-hero cutscenes between some planets so that Quark was always in the back of your mind. As we saw at the end of the first game, Quark began selling personal hygienators under the persona of Steve McQuark. Over the previous year, he had sold enough to fund his plan to frame Ratchet and Clank for the Protopet disaster before he'd come in and save the galaxy himself. As a revenge plan, it's not bad, but in the context of the rest of the game, it's always felt out of nowhere to me, even if those subtle behind-the-hero segments do tie things in thematically. Anyway, he uses this device he stole from Angela to try and tame the original Protopet so that all future clones would become docile as well. But the battery was in backwards, so Tiny Blue Furby becomes Big Blue Furby. The Protopet eats Quark, Ratchet and Clank defeat the Protopet, it spits up Quark, who spits up the device, and Angela reverses the battery to turn the Protopet back to normal. All is well, we meet the real Fizzwidget, and we get a happy ending for everybody except for Quark, who becomes a Megacorp test dummy. And, well... Now look, I'll be frank here, I'm not a fan of the overall plot arc of this game. Whereas in Ratchet 1 we had 3 clear acts, in Going Commando everything just sort of gels into one flowing story. On paper that should be fine, but in execution the last third of the game just feels rushed. There are a lot of times where levels just happen to happen, and we're given an arbitrary reason to tie into that planet, and that doesn't feel acceptable to me. This is particularly heinous in the second half of the game, not so much in the first half where you're still chasing the thief and then learning about the Protopet. That said, everything else about this game's story, besides the formatting and the villain, is a huge improvement over the first game. This game is funny. Like, really, really funny. The cutscenes that introduce you to each level are usually just hilarious. Take these two for example.
Help! Police! To better accommodate the local wildlife, we transformed this impassable jungle into an easily navigable desert.
All the unique characters are great too, from a Captain Quark superfan that we totally won't ever see again, to the Thugs for Less leader, to the arena announcers. It's all just so well executed. Going Commando isn't afraid to be over the top with its humor, and that's a massive plus. Moreover, Ratchet is likable. Insomniac cut the fat out of his character and stopped making him a total jerk, and that alone helps this game a bunch as well. When looking at the whole picture, there are certainly a couple slip-ups here and there with Going Commando's story, namely the rushed pacing near the end of the game, and I certainly miss having a true villain the whole time like Drek, but I very much enjoy Going Commando for what it is plot-wise. Technically speaking, it's probably inferior to the first game from a literary standpoint, but Going Commando is so purely enjoyable due to the characters and the scenes being better written that I generally enjoy the plot more than Ratchet 1. Because of that, I'm giving Going Commando's story a silver bolt. Going Commando changes almost everything you knew about Ratchet and Clank. First things first, you can strafe now. By holding down the L2 or R2 buttons, you can lock your camera behind Ratchet to make aiming more manageable. You can also change weapons more easily on the fly now. By double tapping the triangle button, Ratchet will switch back and forth between his 2 most recent weapons or gadgets. On top of this, the quick select menu pauses now when you hold triangle, meaning you can actually focus on picking the correct weapon for the job in the heat of the moment. Thank you! Now there's still only one quick select wheel, so you're gonna have to limit yourself to your 8 most used weapons, and that can be pretty tough in this game considering there are 24 weapons to choose from. You've still got your blaster, your rocket launcher, and so on, but now you've got a nuke launcher, a sniper, a gun that shoots lava, a shield weapon, shuriken, tiny bodyguard robots, and the motherfucking bouncer, among others. The bouncer is a gun that shoots a giant bouncy bomb that explodes into smaller, homing bouncy bombs, and it is one of my favorite weapons in the entire series. It absolutely destroys pretty much anything in its path, and it's such a fan favorite that they brought it back for the PS4 remake of the first game. Now, of those 24 weapons, about a fifth of them actually returned from the first game, sold by this old robot on an abandoned Gadgetron planet. If you have a save from the first Ratchet game on your memory card, or on your PS3, you can get all of these for free, which is a good price considering they kinda suck. They're a nice little touch, don't get me wrong, but compared to all the Megacorp weapons, they feel incredibly weak. Why would I throw bombs at my enemies when I can fire a nuke at them and kill them 4 times as fast? The only Gadgetron weapon worth really using is the Rhino 2, which is now a rapid-fire missile launcher, and that's as awesome as it sounds, I promise. Otherwise, you really have no reason to use them, especially since they don't have any ability to gain experience at all. Oh, speaking of which, let's talk about arguably the most important addition to the series, leveling up. Going Commando adds in a slew of RPG elements, most notably with the weapons. By defeating enemies, the Megacorp weapons will absorb bits of nanotech, and this bar will slowly grow for each. When it maxes out, your weapon changes aesthetically, its ammo count usually goes up, and its damage improves tremendously. Likewise, Ratchet also earns passive experience for defeating enemies overall, as shown by this meter here. When it fills all the way up, the screen flashes white, killing most enemies nearby, and Ratchet gains an extra hit point. This is what I really wanted out of the first game. When I'm given all these amazing weapons and gadgets, I want to be rewarded for using them. With Ratchet 1 having a low health ceiling, it was always about survival first, so I was generally inclined to use whichever weapon was most effective. Here, I'm encouraged to keep switching weapons and constantly modify my strategies around them on the fly, and that makes me more rounded as a player. If I'm low on health and I'm in a pinch, I can always resort back to my trusty bouncer, but those cases are fewer now because I have enough health to take risks. Even better, you can upgrade your armor as well now. Rather than all enemies doing 1 point of damage as in the first game, the amount of damage they do scales based on the enemy type and what set of armor you have. Later levels often feel like a threat, especially if you decide to put those hard-earned bolts into buying new weapons rather than getting that next armor set, and it adds a whole new layer of challenge to the game. While your health continues to improve up to a maximum of 80, when a weapon is leveled up once, that's it. The bouncer becomes the heavy bouncer, the blitz gun becomes the blitz cannon, and the lava gun becomes the meteor gun. This is one of 3 points where I'd argue the developers at Insomniac screwed up gameplay-wise, and they've actually gone on record in agreement. With every other weapon in the game, leveling up doesn't change the weapon's functionality. The Lancer is still a laser machine gun, the Seeker gun still seeks, and so on. With the lava gun, it goes from shooting a continuous stream of liquid lava to shooting molten rocks machine gun style. Obviously that changes how you're gonna use the weapon, and that goes against the whole point of leveling up these weapons. If I want to use the lava gun, I have to use it sparingly so that I don't level it up, and that's counterintuitive. Never again would Insomniac change how a weapon works fundamentally by leveling it up, and obviously that's for the best. But that's one of the few inconveniences in a game designed around convenience. There are hundreds of tiny improvements from the first game. For example, if I need ammo, I can go to a weapons vendor, hit X on the weapon I need ammo for, and hit X again, and my ammo's maxed out. In the first game, it started you at 1 unit of ammo and you had to scroll all the way back up, and that's obviously just a waste of time. There are also other little touches, such as being able to use most gadgets contextually rather than having to equip them. Considering there are an almost overbearing number of gadgets in this game, that in particular is a good thing to have changed. Where the first game had 1 puzzle gadget, Going Commando has 2, the Electrolyzer and the Infiltrator. They're both alright, nothing too easy, nothing too hard, but I'm not really sure why we needed 2 though. The former has you flipping switches to complete currents, and the latter has you trying to find the correct path on a sphere. Clank still has all 3 of his upgrades from the first game, with the Hydro Pack now equipping automatically when you enter water. On top of these though, there are 2 Clank-based gadgets as well, the Glider and the Levitator, the latter of which is sold by the Rhino guy from the first game, only now he's twice as tall? Again, these 2 are just sort of thrown in to break the pace up a bit. There are 3 sets of boots, the returning grind boots and the modified gravity boots, which are just the magnet boots except they let you jump and move normally now, thank God, as well as the optional charge boots, which allow you to speed through long stretches a little more quickly than before. With the exception of the charge boots, these don't have to be equipped to be used either, and even the charge boots generally stay equipped for you anyway. Then there are the gadgets you can equip. There's the returning swing shot, there's the dynamo which activates holographic platforms, there's the therminator which freezes and unfreezes water, there's the tractor beam which moves specific platforms around, and there's the hypnomatic which allows you to control specific robots. Jesus, there is some gadget overload in this game. In most cases, I'm fine with these. It's only when I get to the Hypnomatic that I start to have some issues. The Hypnomatic is used less than 5 times total in this game, and the only real reason it exists is to make you backtrack through a couple levels. It just feels shoehorned in, it's not really fun to use, and it really helps contribute to that rushed feeling I get by the last 4 levels or so. Oh, whoops, I started complaining again. Well, you know what, while we're at it, let's talk about the final complaint I have about Going Commando's gameplay, the Yetis. In this game, there are 2 planets with a huge terrain dedicated to you finding moon crystals for this guy. He helps you forward the plot at first, and then later gives you a huge amount of bolts for finding all the extra crystals. The first of these, the desert world of Tabora, is amazingly fun actually. The second, Grelvin, is a total pain in the ass, entirely because of these guys. They have far too much health, they do far too much damage, their attack animation is far too short, meaning they attack a lot, and they don't stop spawning. This is really the only point in Going Commando where the frame rate will drop below 60 frames per second, because this can happen. It's so bad that Insomniac actually created an award called the Yeti Award, given to the developer that designs the worst part of each game they make. Okay, that's really it for my complaints. The rest of the enemies are well designed, and more importantly, they're fun to fight, with many encouraging different strategies and thus making you use a wider variety of weapons. There are a ton of passive items you can get to, say, smash all the destructible objects in an area, or magnetize your armor to make bolts fly to you from a longer distance. There are combat arenas now, where you can partake in challenges to earn bolts and level up your weapons in between worlds. They brought in combat hoverbike races to replace the hoverboard races of the first game. There are a ton of awesome boss fights. Perhaps the most impressive innovation in this game are these fully traversable spherical moons that give Ratchet and his weapon shots a unique form of physics and gravity. This was 4 years before Mario Galaxy came out, keep that in mind. When you're beating Mario to innovation, that's impressive. They brought back space battles and fleshed them out with a diverse set of weapons that you could upgrade by finding raritanium in these battles. Clank's gameplay returns too, but it's fleshed out even more with unique and interesting bot types, and it's actually kind of fun this time around. Hell, Giant Clank returns too, and they even flesh out his gameplay a bit, and they put him on those gravity moons. There's a section not too dissimilar from that famous moving train sequence in Uncharted 2, where you're just fighting your way up an armored car envoy. There's a tiny section where you wall jump up a frozen waterfall, again 4 years before Galaxy. Ratchet and Clank, quietly innovating since 2002. On top of all these new, wonderful additions, there are the returning things like skill points and collectible platinum bolts that replace gold bolts. Platinum bolts can be traded into this shady salesman named Slim Cognito for passive weapon mods. These mods include an acid mod that adds extra damage, a shock mod that chains damage to nearby enemies, or a lock-on mod that allows you to directly lock onto a specific enemy by holding down L2 and R2. That last one can really help for those enemies that hover just a bit too high for you to easily aim at them. And I haven't even mentioned how purely enjoyable this game is yet. I've talked about all these changes, but they wouldn't matter at all if the game weren't fun, and it is damn fun. The positive feedback loop set up in the first game is refined almost masterfully here. There's always a new way to earn bolts, something to spend those bolts on, always something interesting to do, and then there's challenge mode. After beating the game, you have the choice to restart with all your weapon progress, except now, enemies get stronger, they drop drastically more bolts, and there's a bolt multiplier. The multiplier will give you anywhere from 2 to 20 times as many bolts depending on how many enemies you can kill in a row without being hit. Plus, almost every weapon in challenge mode has a purchasable mega upgrade that allows you to gain more experience and level it up to an even more damaging ultra version. You can play this game half a dozen times and not get bored simply because of how much there is to do. Most importantly, it won't feel like a grind when you're trying to get those higher end weapons like the Rhino. You legitimately won't notice because you're having too much fun. It's just an excellent gameplay experience, and 2 or 3 hiccups doesn't change that one bit. For that reason, I'm giving Going Commando a golden bolt for its gameplay. Let's start with the soundtrack. Where the first Ratchet had an all-out futuristic techno vibe going for it, Going Commando opts for a more militarized feel with its music. It makes total sense given the circumstances. Ratchet is literally a commando now, and it's not the duo's first rodeo anymore. Where the first game often sprinkled in these wondrous themes to fit these new locales that neither hero had ever experienced before, here it's about a mission. There's no time to take in the scenery, you've got a galaxy to save. That doesn't mean the themes are any less enjoyable though, they're phenomenal at times. Every theme fits the planet it's designed for insanely well, and composer David Bergot takes great care to ensure that no theme overpowers the gameplay for that level. There are no bombastic pieces playing during the subdued platforming sections. Likewise, you won't hear a quiet theme getting drowned out in any combat sections. It all just clicks. Even though Ratchet and Clank are more focused in Going Commando and can't take a minute to breathe in these new locales, that doesn't mean they're any less wonderful. Bogon is a stark contrast from the previous game's Solana Galaxy. Solana never had any specific themes about it that carried throughout all of Ratchet 1's planets. Bogon, though, from beginning to end, oozes this big business monopoly type vibe. Every planet has something about it reminding you that Megacorp runs the show here. Every Megacorp commercial you see shines with this calculated shot at modern business. I think a lot of this reads even better today than it did in 2003. That's how well it all holds up. There isn't much repetition between level designs, from space casinos to public tours of weapon facilities to warehouse planets. It all finds a way to stand out not only from the shadow of its predecessor, but also within itself from level to level. With nearly 20 full levels in the game, that's impressive. The voice acting is naturally all top-notch too. James Arnold Taylor in particular does an excellent job of taking over as Ratchet, and he subtly moves the character away from his old, jerkish mannerisms and into a goofier persona. David Kay is always a 10 out of 10 performance, with his Clank really coming into his own here, and his dozen miscellaneous voices always getting a laugh. It's all just wonderful, and the voice direction is a real high point here. Like I noted earlier, if you're playing the PS3 version, you're gonna run into a couple graphical bugs here and there, and occasionally the music won't loop correctly. The PS2 version is arguably the better version here, but you really can't go wrong with either, considering just how good the PS3 version looks upscaled to 1080p. The whole package looks great, it sounds great, it's all designed with love from top to bottom. The presentation of Going Commando is going to get a golden bolt here as well. If you're looking for a game to keep your attention long after you beat it, Going Commando is probably a good beast for you to tackle. With so many weapons to collect, so many upgrades to earn, and so much optional content, you can sink hours upon hours into this game without even noticing. Completionists will both love and hate this game, because while you do have to play through it at least 2 or 3 times to get everything, you're gonna have a hard time doing that without a smile on your face. Some of the optional content, like the skill points or certain arena challenges where you can't get hit, can be on the rough side, but it's still a blast either way. And then there's all the bonus stuff I didn't mention. There's a full Monsterpedia in this game that lets you read up on every single enemy as you encounter them if you wish. Perhaps best of all, there's the Insomniac Museum, a hidden level focused entirely around showing players the content cut from both Going Commando and the first Ratchet game. Occasionally games might come with an art book or something, but I can't recall many developers that go out of their way to show off content that they wanted to include but didn't have the time to. It's not advertised or anything, it's just hidden away for players to find for themselves. That's awesome! The only consistent complaints I have about this game involve the last few levels, where I just feel the game struggles a bit under the massive weight of all the changes it brought to the Ratchet formula. But I can forgive that because the rest of the game is a top-tier PlayStation experience. You can find Going Commando online for about $10 on PS2, and the HD collection on PS3 is still easily available for $15 to $20. If you want the pure experience, grab it on PS2, but either version should work fine enough if you're just looking for one hell of a good time. Now that I've gotten my fill of Ratchet and Clank for the time being, we're going to continue right on with our Too Many Games marathon thingy. I should really create a name for that soon. But either way, next week we will be tackling Brave Fencer Musashi on the PlayStation 1. As always, thanks for watching, and stay golden. If you liked the video and you want to keep up to date every time I put out a new video, be sure to subscribe.